This section of the day is going to be mostly linked to dashboarding, reporting, and related presentation of data. So I will hand over to Alexei to talk about what you can do.
All right. Thanks, Phil. Yeah, so I'm here to give a little talk on improving the performance and style of reports and reporting in Arches. So first, a little background. About a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, I think, really, Getty Digital, which is part of the Getty umbrella, came to us. And they, obviously being part of the Getty, had become aware of Arches and wanted to use Arches for a large data set that they were curating and trying to digitize, called the provenance data set. And the provenance data set is essentially what it says. It's tracking the provenance of artworks, the sale of artworks in the world. And they had stood up a version of Arches and started to use it with some subset of their data and noticed a few issues that were going to be maybe problematic for them. One was that the reports themselves were fairly generic. That is, they didn't really stress or emphasize, or they weren't able to emphasize or stress any part of the data over another part of the data. And the provenance models themselves, if you're at all familiar with George Brusacker, they are very detailed and very deeply nested. And because of that, some of the data that they want to present and really kind of focus on and highlight isn't, readily available when you just kind of look at the standard report. And again, it's very limited in kind of what it can show and what it can't show and kind of how you emphasize or de-emphasize things. So that was one issue. The next issue was that reports could be very slow. They had a fairly substantial database of information, and they noticed, that reports could take from 10 to 20 seconds to load to half a minute, 2 minutes sometimes, or even not load at all. And so that was, of course, going to be a problem. And so they came to us and said, can you do something about that? Is there a way to improve the performance of these reports, and also improve the way we present information itself? And so, like I said, the provenance data set was quite large, and we're all familiar with kind of typical data sets in the 10 to 100,000 K resource sizes that were pretty standard up until this point. Before I'd met the provenance data set, that was fairly common size of data set. And at that scale, Arches performs okay. I mean, we all knew that there were some issues with performance. It had come up, even with those types of data sets, those sizes of data sets. But this was not a typical data set. This data set from provenance is 12 million resources. So it's orders of magnitude larger than kind of what we'd ever worked with before. And it has 84 million resource relations. And if you've ever tried to crawl the resource relations, that is kind of a bear of a table to crawl. And so 84 million, it's even harder. And it's at 140 million tiles. So it's a large data set. And that size of data set just, really kind of really exposed some areas in Arches and the Arches reports and the editor, I'll say as well, that just that size of data set really brought to its knees. So, can we do something to improve Arches? And so we put our best minds on the job, and we're going to rebuild Arches reports from the ground up. And that's what we did. Or that's what we set out to achieve. I'll let you be the judge of that. So the project goals really were to reduce load times to about 4 to 5 seconds max per report, for any report. Any size, any amount of data in that report. That's the target. And again, if you're all familiar with Arch's reports, some reports load fast, some reports load slow. It just kind of seems obviously data related clearly, but even reports with like what you would think is a minimal amount of data, literally 20 or 30 strings, can take even 10 or 20 seconds seems like, well, that's a lot for that tiny bit of data. So that was the metric, one of the metrics we were going to use. The other one, of course, was we were going to do this all in Vue. And because Vue is the future of kind of where the direction of Arches is going, it was going to be all in Vue, at least the report itself, with the caveat that this isn't going to be a standalone bespoke app in Vue. This is going to live within the Arches ecosystem. So that means it has to have full integration with the Arches UI. I mean, it's going to be surrounded by the Arches Chrome, right? And which means at some point there has to be some kind of communication with like existing Arches code, meaning knockout, right? There's going to be some little handshake there, and then we're going to get to this Vue report. And at that point, though, it's all Vue all the way down. So it has to work in several places too. It's not just the report. If you realize the report kind of shows up also, it also shows up in the graph designer, didn't it? Shows up in the editor. So we want to kind of maintain that it's not just going to be this kind of, oh yeah, it's here in the report, but yeah, it doesn't really work anywhere else. It's going to have to work other places too. It was also have to be component based. So yeah, no monolithic code, right? Our current report's pretty monolithic. And this was not going to be that. We were going to try to essentially break the report UI into, meaningful, what would be meaningful logical chunks, meaningful UI chunks of work, and those would define kind of view-based components, single file components that would then be able to be used in this way or maybe used in other ways, right? So as much as possible, these things are kind of standalone. And then finally, it's going to be configuration driven. So another requirement was, unlike current Arches reports, there's essentially one report for every model. It's the same style. There is no real configuration between model types. That is, all model types essentially share the same thing, and that's it. And I know you can have custom reports, and of course we have that as well, like different flavors of reports, but still not a ton of configurability between those things. So it's going to be configuration driven on a per model type basis. So those were the goals. And so now I'm going to show what does that actually mean. So live demo time, here we go. First, what I'm going to show you is, which I really don't need to because you all know it, but I'm going to show you the original report. And this is just an example of one report in my local machine. This is on my local machine. There's nothing special about this. Okay, there we go. So, I mean, it's not terrible. It's not great. As far as load times go, it can get a lot worse. And so this is the report we all know and love, and obviously it's just essentially totally hierarchical. The minimal kind of configurability you have is to either kind of reorder the cards themselves or the node group based kind of high level definitions there. So you can reorder them to kind of maybe emphasize one card over another. You can hide cards and you can hide nodes. That's really about it. And then you're kind of stuck with this UI. And so that was certainly insufficient for Provenance. The Provenance project itself, they had kind of more lofty goals. And so without further ado, well, that's not it. we're I just switched over, just that was a little sleight of hand there. So now we're on an actual staging server for these new reports, and this is the new report for provenance and how it renders. And so you can see a lot faster. That was probably a order of magnitude faster than the previous report loaded. And this, again, is how the reports for provenance are styled. Now, they came to us, they kind of, with a vision for what they needed. And this is the actualization of that vision. And you can see it's a lot maybe more densely populated with information. But essentially, this report is broken down into specific view components that relate to essentially sections of this report itself. So the real performance gains and the real performance gains come from the fact that we were able to essentially not rely on any previous work. Although we have to live within the Arch's Chrome, the current reports are hamstrung with a bunch of information that is presented to users or pulled from the system that is excessive and unnecessary. So we do a lot of lazy loading of information here. So the way this works is essentially there is a configuration that drives how this report looks. It can drive the title up here, which is its own component. It can drive the nodes that end up showing up here. So again, the Getty project really wanted to be able to highlight certain bits of information within a report. For example, let's say if you have a person model, their birth date, their death date might be important. It also might be buried, and probably is buried, somewhere in the data. But if you want to present that information, that's like very pertinent information to that type of model. The way to do that that we came up with is this, the section called what they call a tombstone. But essentially, it's just individual nodes that you can specify in this configuration to present it essentially at the top of the report. And again, this is completely configurable. So obviously, this is for this physical object model. A person model could have different nodes that it could present up at the top, and different information based on however the admin wants to configure these reports. Just scrolling down a little bit, we have two sections, the data section and related resource section. These again are loaded kind of progressively. Previous reports everything was dumped to the screen, that is all the information and the related resource information. Again, it's a heavy payload and potentially unnecessary, so we only load things here as users need it. You can see that kind of split second where we were loading stuff for a related resource. So we just only load things as needed, really. And then these sections here, this tabbed section essentially is kind of a generic tabbed section. And what users are able to do are specify these named sections. Named sections are something completely arbitrary. They're not. This is not anything that's currently in Arches, or this concept isn't currently in Arches. But what this allows users to do is say, I want to group multiple cards worth of information, multiple node groups worth of information into a single, contextual group, if you will, and lump them in this way and present them this way. And this information doesn't have to be like top level cards, if you will. It can be from any depth within the system. So any node group that you want to bring up can be brought up this way and presented this way in these groups. And they're presented. You can see they're presented kind of as data tables. They're tabular. And this allows users, again, to kind of highlight and focus what we're going to present to users in the UI. And these are all linkable, so you can scroll down and link to other things. And if we happen to have, so if you present data in that way, you pick a node group or a card, for example, to present in this data table. There is potentially data underneath it. If there is data underneath it, you can see this little caret. It expands, and this is a kind of a concession to the fact that we have and are still confronted with deeply nested data. So this kind of what they call the table drawer is essentially presenting information like Arches currently does in this kind of hierarchical format. We did consider, just like tables all the way down, if you will, and that I guess is totally still a possibility, the way we've architected this. But for now, and for Getty Digital and for provenance, this is how information is being presented, and all these things are view components. So this section of the report is its own view component, and so could be swapped out with another view component if necessary, or if we desired to kind of have a different rendering, for example. And that's the general look and feel of the reports for provenance. What I'd like to show next is how we configure those things. So if I'm going to go to a configuration, so I'm going to go to the configuration for that actual model. I don't know if people can see that. Is that? Probably not. Let's see if I can make that bigger. So maybe I should back up here. So we've, as part of this project, we essentially created this additional model or table, really. And that table essentially allows us to store off the configuration for each report on a per model basis. And so that's what you're looking at here. These are individual models that have been configured with certain configurations. And this configuration is essentially just a JSON payload, as you can see. And it's pretty simple. It's a repeating pattern all the way down. There's a name at the top. I guess that's the only thing that validates that pattern. There's a name. You can name these things. And ultimately, then it's just a list of components. And it's an array of components. And these component configurations now kind of maintain this similar pattern. That is, they define a component reference, and they define a config. And the config gets passed to the component reference. And that pattern holds that is the base pattern for all these view components. And so what we can see here is this is just literally a list, an array of component references and their configurations all the way down. There's a report header and a report toolbar. There's a report tombstone, and which we define certain configurations for. And you can see here, I'll highlight this. We made a concerted effort to rid ourselves of UUIDs, and I'll just anecdotally I'll say we built a bespoke report for Getty Digital before this. That was before Vue was even in our views before Vue was actually something that we were going to use, and it was exactly like what Jacob had shown us in that slide of his, where you would reference node IDs, and it worked. It was fast. It achieved that goal, and but it was like if you've built anything bespoke for Arches, it was great for that thing, and then you had to do that 10 times for the other models, and you were like, well, okay, it's possible. It's not going to be fun, and it's not going to be very maintainable, but it's certainly possible. And so in the intervening time, Vue came into being into what we thought was a future direction for Arches, and we took this tack. And this solves a lot of those issues about maintainability and extensibility. and ease of use. And so again, node aliases, graph names, or graph slugs rather, are used throughout this. So there's not really a UUID to be found in here, which I think is a good thing. And then back to this config. It's just a simple config that configures every kind of aspect of these things. So I wouldn't say the config is small. It's not. But it does configure, it does allow for pretty detailed configuration of all of these things. So it's a lot to process. And let me just see. So I mean, if for example I want to create a new one, I get a blank config, and I'm gonna create it for this guy. And then all I have to do is start typing, nickname equals something. Right? And then all you have to do is just, create that structure all the way down. So that's pretty easy, right? Okay, I'm glad you guys laughed, because like that nervous laughter of like this. I hope you're joking. I am joking. Yeah, that was like nervous. Deer in the headlights look like, oh God. No, you don't. If I guess you could do that if you're a glutton for pain. But if you don't do anything, what I can do is here I can just save and continue, and voila, I get 90% of what I probably need. So we have some intelligent faults. So, for example, we use top level. All the top level cards are exposed in that data tab. A set of reasonable, all related resources in the resource tab. Everything's structured in a certain way. Nothing's grouped, but it gives you the kind of basic structure then to then edit and modify these configurations. And I'll have you note that this is all dynamic. So there's no, if I rebuild this config or edit this config and save it, I don't have to restart my web server. I don't have to build Webpack or do anything like that. It is all completely dynamic, and it'll be reflected immediately once you save the configuration. And again, these components are pretty detailed. Whoops, wrong one. In that you can show or hide this. So this is a card and a tile. You can show or hide, nodes like you would ordinarily. You can override essentially also what's in the configuration of the graph itself. You can in fact rename things if necessary. Maybe the node name or the widget label isn't actually what you want. You could always adjust it in the graph, but maybe you can't edit the graph. So this allows you to kind of override those things. And on the related resource side, you can, by default, you're going to get the type of relation, the relation name itself, and of course the link to the relation, the related resource. But then additionally, you can add additional information into this configuration of additional information on that related resource that you would like to expose. Again, just to provide more context, if I'm related, again, to a person, maybe I can add that that person's birth date in there, or some other relevant information that makes sense contextually within this report. And that's all configurable as well. And that I'm not going to show any code tonight, so I'm sure you're going to be disappointed by that. But trust me when I say it's fast, and it makes sense. There's no mystery here. There wasn't any. We did use the JC tool. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's a super powerful tool. It helps you kind of make really fast and awesome code. It's called the Jacob and Christopher. I don't know. If you happen to have a Jacob or Christopher on your team, you can make things work well. But seriously, no. I mean, it's really just optimized SQL, and it's also these reports, I would say, also do not depend at all on Elasticsearch. So unlike our current reports, which I just tested the other day because I wanted to see that, I just turned off Elasticsearch to see if I could run the report. I could not. These don't have that problem. I'm already 5 minutes over, so I'm sorry. But essentially, these are the sections. Each section corresponds to actual single file component in view. And the power of here is that, as you can see, those components, you can imagine creating your own component and swapping it in. And again, all you have to do is create that component, reference it in the config, and it's there. There's no building necessary. And just anecdotally, you can kind of see page load size dropped a little bit. And again, we're pulling, I'm including the whole page. That's the Chrome as well. So there's a lot of weight in that. But even maybe more importantly, what we just saw with that one report, typically, 15 second down to 3.5 seconds. And that's all I got.
We have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. I will say that I wrote down a link to go and find out about the JC tool.
He's like, JC?
Yeah.
I'm on it?
Yeah. What's the subscription?
Yeah.
So we've actually got a few questions already.
That's great.
So I think Brett was first, I think. That's got Matt and Andy, is that right? Yeah, so, okay, go ahead, Brett.
First of all, absolutely awesome. It's great. It's exciting to see this. I think one of the really cool things, other than the fast, it's really fast.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things we've come across is it actually unlinks the edit view from the report, which is like, we always have this conversation with clients. It's like, if you want the default report, then it's really got to match what you have in the view. And often we're trying to do, a different view on that. Mm-hmm. The other thing I was wondering about is, and I'm not sure if you thought about this or if it's in your scope, but sort of doing like a user or a group to report configuration, where it's like you might want one, one user, and it seems like you're there, other than like maybe the configuration of, like for a public user you get to see this, and if you're admin you see that, and it seems like you're already there, but just like a little bit more metadata. Is that something you're thinking about, or?
No, although you're right. I mean, I think we are quite close to doing that. I mean, it's become obvious to me. Obviously, if you saw that table where you add the configs, that there's nothing limiting the number of reports potentially that you could associate with a certain model, and then you could add some additional metadata to allow for different reports for different users and different interactions and different experiences. So I totally think that is certainly something that probably will happen, although as far as the project with Getty Digital goes, that's kind of, we're there pretty much with them.
Yeah.
But certainly the intent, this is probably going to form the basis for, I think, where future reporting is going to go in Arches.
Awesome.
So, yeah, we're certainly close.
Okay.
Sorry.
Andy?
I just want to know when we can have it, because I've got a lot of work about to arrive, which is what that was. So,
Well, I mean, so like I said, there is work afoot to kind of translate this. This is right now in essentially a closed project, but there is some future upcoming work that will take that and put it into an Arches application again, where we can expose this and have users use it. It's not complete. They're like IIIF. We don't have any way of kind of demonstrating that. Maps either, really, right now. So that was really complicated. Provenance didn't have any mapping data. It wasn't needed, and it was a very complicated, it would have been probably a pretty complicated view implementation, potentially. And a couple other, like Node view and files. But
you are using Component Lab, right?
We are using Component Lab, so we do have, there's already a foundation for the mapping stuff. It's just not, we haven't translated that, but yes, it's true. So.
It's more for a request. Can we have a validate JSON bottom before we implement? As in, can this be possible to validate before implement? Because I don't want to break my.
Yeah, I would show that to you, but yes, again, we made certain, we worked pretty hard on making sure that if you enter something incorrectly, it's going to scream at you, and it will give you at least some kind of intelligent way of hey, that node name doesn't exist in that resource. That's an invalid node alias. Whatever. So yes, there is a bit of validation on that. So we did we did strive for that. So if I were to show you that and like put something wrong, it would show you a little red flag saying you can't save this, there's some issue. Yep.
Yeah, so just quickly, so I've been working with Alexei closely on
Yeah,
the
actually.
provenance index project, and what Alexei didn't show you was there were some reports that I've personally waited, and our scholars, for like 15 minutes for the report to show up in the old system. Even those reports show up in under less than 2 or 3 seconds. So when we created this statement of work for Farallon, we were like, well, 5 seconds, maybe 10, we'll do it even 10 seconds, you know. But they, you know,
Now they'd make it
exceeded
10.
our expectations, and kudos to Farallon for getting us through the finish line, because this project goes live on 1st of May. And
Yeah,
we're
it's-
thrilled.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say this data set has been awesome to work with. And sorry, we're going to go over because of its size. It's just it has stress tested arches a lot, and it's exposed some kind of, again, these areas where I think it allowed us to see where we could improve, and that was really helpful too. And like she said, it goes live. There's a ton of data that's never been seen before of the provenance of all these records that was living in spreadsheets, and now it's out in the open.